Welcome to the 2018 CUUC Friday Qualifier Seating and Format Explanation video. This is something new I decided to do to help increase the transparency of the process and to hopefully have fewer emails after the fact trying to explain the seating and the format and all that was done. So I'm Andrew Batchelor, the Competition Director for Ultimate Canada. Here I have my brother-in-law Zach helping me out. I've been Competition Director for Ultimate Canada since 2010. I am the one in charge of making the schedules and the seedings for the Friday Qualifier as well as other tournaments. We found after the first year of adding the Friday Qualifier that the burden on teams was sometimes too large going into the Saturday of CUUCs for both the last team in and the first team out. And so instead we modified the process so that the format would be approved by the competition committee ahead of time. So for 2018, in the women's division, I had 6 teams for 3 bids. I presented 8 options to the competition committee. The one that they decided to go with was 2 pools of 3, a full round robin within the pool. Pool winners will go straight to CUUC Div 1 after 2 games. There was no need to cross over those 2 teams as both of those teams are going to end up in the same pool in Div 1, so they'll get a chance to resolve that seed themselves on the field on Saturday. And then the second place teams of each pool will play each other for that final bid in the 8th seed into Div 1. The other teams will be seeded into Div 2 accordingly. There are 6 teams in CUUC Div Friday Qualifier. 5 of those teams were at Easterns, so seeding them was a rather straightforward process. Ranked them 1 through 5 based on final results. The only team that wasn't there was Regina. Based on 2017 results, I felt they deserved a 4 or a 5 seed. As 4 and 5 are in the same pool for round robin play, there was no difference between them. I put Regina 4 and Western 5. The seedings will be available at the time this video is published. For the open division, that was a whole other problem. We had 15 teams and only 2 bids available. I presented 6 options to the competition committee. Many of them had far too many games. For a full double elimination bracket, it was going to require 7 games in one day, which is far too many as deemed by the competition committee. Even shortening them was not a good idea. What the competition committee instead decided to do was to split the tournament into 2. There will be 1 7-team pool and 1 8-team pool, and they will play for 1 bid each, and there's no crossing over. This is done to reduce the number of games, and I know there's a little bit of loss of fairness there, but that's the way we're going to do that. The competition committee decided that shortening games and having more of them was not appropriate action in this situation this year. At the same time, we're going to experiment with a new seeding mechanism that should help fix the problem with that fairness. We're going to use what's often done in tennis is seeding teams based on pots. You can also see this in the World Cup qualifier process. So what we've come up with is I've come up with 5 pots. The first pot's going to have the top 2 teams. The next pot's going to have teams 3 and 4. The next pot's going to have teams 5 through 8. And then pot 4 is going to have teams 9 through 14. And then the last team number 15, will be in pot 5 by themselves. So let's go through these teams and discuss how I assign them to each pot. So here we go. These are the teams. So in pot 1, we have the University of Ottawa. This team came 2nd at Steeltown and 3rd at Easterns. They lost 3 games to go to Div 1. All their losses are to teams in the top tier or who decided not to come to the Friday Qualifier. Those are Queens, Guelph, and Toronto and Brock. But they also have wins against Brock, Ryerson twice, Western and Waterloo, other top teams that are here at this Friday Qualifier. The other team in pot 1 is going to be the University of Winnipeg. They the only losses they have on this year are to Manitoba twice. They lost the game to go at Prairie Regionals. They have good wins against Saskatchewan and Alberta twice. This is a team that has many great players and has well earned their spot in pot 1. In pot 2, we have first the University of Laval. So they are the 3rd team from the Quebec Qualifier. They have a loss to the University of Quebec at Montreal and to the University of Sherbrooke. They have a win against the University of Sherbrooke, so that's good. They had in Div 1 last year, the top team. I think they earned their spot in pot 2. And then the other team in pot 2 is the University of Waterloo. They came 4th at Easterns and 4th at Steeltown. They have good wins against Carleton and Ryerson. All their losses are to teams above them: Queens twice, Guelph, Ottawa, and Brock. So they're the last team that's going to go into Pot 2, well-earned spot. Now on to Pot 3. We're going to start with Carleton University. They finished 7th at Easterns and 7th at Steeltown. They have wins against Western twice, York and Ryerson, teams still available here. Their losses this year are to Guelph, Waterloo, Brock, and Queens, teams above them. They've earned their spot in Pot 3. The next team in Pot 3 is Ryerson. They finished 6th at Eastern and 6th at Steeltown, similar results to Carleton, but they have that head-to-head loss. They have good wins against Toronto and York and UOIT. Their losses this year, twice to Ottawa, Waterloo, Brock, Carleton, Queens, teams all put ahead of them. The next team in Pot 3 is Western, University of Western Ontario. They finished 8th at Easterns and 11th at Steeltown. They have a good win against Toronto twice and Brock once. Those are some really top teams, but they do have losses to Guelph, Carleton, Brock, Ottawa, and UOIT, so Pot 3 is a reasonable spot for them. The last team in Pot 3 is Sherbrooke. They finished 4th at Quebec Regionals, losing to McGill and Laval, teams ahead of them. They beat Montreal, a team that's not here. Based on their 2017 results, they do compare favorably to the next few teams that we're going to talk about in Pot 4. So that's it for Pot 3. Now we'll move on to Pot 4. We're going to start with York University. They finished 10th at Easterns and 10th at Steeltown. They have good wins against Waterloo B, Laurier, McMaster, but those are all teams we haven't discussed yet. They have losses to Ryerson and Carleton, Toronto twice, Brock, Algonquin, UOIT. So they finished just outside of Pot 3 and in Pot 4. The next team in Pot 4 that was considered for Pot 3 is Memorial. In 2017, they finished 5-3. They had a lot of wins in Div 2, but on the Friday qualifier, they had losses to York and Sherbrooke. Those are teams that are just ahead of them. Pot 4 seems like the right spot for Memorial based on their 2017 results. The next team considered for Pot 3 was Regina. So they don't have any good wins this year. They've beaten Alberta B. Last year they had losses to Ryerson and Western. They have losses to Manitoba and Winnipeg this year. They did finish 13th in Div 2 last year, so Pot 4 is probably the highest I could do for them. Yeah. The next team in Pot 4 that was still considered for Pot 3 is Laurier. They had that huge win against Toronto at Steeltown, but their losses to York and Waterloo and Ryerson and Carleton and a really disappointing loss to Waterloo B. There's just too many losses there to get them into Pot 3. Pot 4 is the right spot for them. They finished 8th at Steeltown and 13th at Easterns. The next team in Pot 4, McMaster A. They finished 12th at Steeltown and 13th at Easterns. They have wins against Waterloo B and Queens B, so nothing really to write home about. They have losses to Carleton, Ryerson, Waterloo, York, Western, Queens, Algonquin, Laurier, so all teams that are ahead of them. Laurier in the same pot as them. So I think Pot 4 is the best that I could do for them. And then the last team in Pot 4 is Waterloo B. They finished 11th at Easterns and 13th at Steeltown. They had that big win against Laurier at Easterns. The rest of their wins are against B teams, including McMaster B. They have losses to Ryerson, McMaster, Carleton, Waterloo, York, Toronto, all teams ahead of them. Pot 4 is the right spot for Waterloo B. And then the last team all by themselves in Pot 5 is McMaster B. They finished 15th at Easterns, 15th at Steeltown. They haven't beaten anybody that's here even close. Their only wins this year are against Carleton B. They have 2 of them, but that's the right spot for them. Yeah, so and the last thing what we're going to do is we're going to draw teams from the pot. The teams in Pot 1, Ottawa and Winnipeg, will be seated 1 on each of the brackets, bracket Y and Z. Let's reveal those brackets now. Here they are. So the teams in Pot 1 will go on the 1 lines. The teams in Pot 2 will go on the 2 lines here and here. The teams in Pot 3 and will go on the 3 and the 4 lines. So we'll draw them out in order. Y3, Z3, Y4, Z4. And then in pot 4, they're going to go on this lines 5, 6, and 7, so I'll draw them out in order. Y5, Z5, Y6, Z6, Y7, Z7, and then the last team in pot 5 is McMaster B. They will go right away onto the Z8 line. So let's just check that in now. Alright, and now the way we're going to do this random drawing is I have the pot 1 envelopes, 2 identical envelopes with a name card inside of each of them. I'll present them to my brother-in-law who will draw an envelope, and that will be the team for Y1. Y1 is in that envelope. The team is the University of Ottawa. And so the other team, it's going to be Z1. Zach, please reveal. Is Winnipeg. Alright, so let's put those aside now and let's get the pot 2 envelopes. So again, 2 identical envelopes for pot 2. These include Laval and Waterloo A. So Zach, take your pick. Zach has chosen that envelope. And this is for Y2. Y2 is going to be Waterloo A. Okay, and then Z2 is Laval. Alright, so now we're going to go to pot 3. We have 4 identical envelopes here. We're going to start with Y3, Z3, Y4, Z4. Okay, so Zach, pick your Y3. This is Y3. For Y3, we have Western. Western University. University of Western Ontario is Y3. Pick the next envelope for Z3. Z3 is going to be Carleton University. Alright, now Y4 is going to be Sherbrooke University. Y4 is Sherbrooke. University of Sherbrooke. And the last envelope for Z4 is then Ryerson University. Alright, and that brings us down to the pot 4 envelopes. We have 6 of these envelopes here. We're going to start with Y5. Y5, take your pick. Pick the first envelope has been selected. For Y5, we have York University. Alright, for Z5 now, take your pick. 5 envelopes left. For Z5, he has chosen Laurier University. University of Wilfrid Laurier University. So now Y6, we're going to do Y6 next. Y6 is going to be Memorial University from Newfoundland. Okay, and now Z6. Z6 is going to be Waterloo B. Waterloo B is Z6. Okay, this is now Y7. Y7. Y7 is Regina. And that leaves Z7 to be McMaster A. Alright, so here we have it. These are our brackets for the Friday qualifier. We'll have one team from these 7 qualify and one team from these 8 qualify. Win all your games. That's how you're going to qualify. So, thanks for tuning in and have a great CUUC.